In April 2025, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu sounds alarms as Trump's nuclear talks with Iran in Rome risk a deal echoing Obama's 2015 accord. Fearing Iran's 60% uranium enrichment, he demands a full shutdown or military strikes, while Trump pushes diplomacy. Social media warns of nuclear escalation and U.S. missteps. As Iran resists dismantling its program, global markets and NATO alliances wobble. Why is Netanyahu panicked, and what's at stake? We'll unpack the news, background, and fallout in 6 steps, delivering raw truth for Libertarian Uncensored. No fluff, just facts to navigate this crisis. Let's dive in. Chapter 1. Trump's 2025. Iran talks and Netanyahu's alarm. On April 12, 2025, U.S. and Iranian officials met in Oman for nuclear talks, followed by a second round in Rome on April 19th, led by Trump's envoy and Iran's foreign minister. Trump announced the talks on April 7th alongside Netanyahu, who opposed any deal resembling the 2015 agreement, which allowed Iran 3.67% uranium enrichment. Netanyahu demands a complete nuclear shutdown, warning that Iran's 60% enrichment, near bomb grade with 5,000 active centrifuges, threatens Israel. Trump's March 3rd ultimatum, deal by May 31st or face bombing, met Iran's demand for sanctions relief, not dismantling. Social media fears a weak deal emboldening Iran. Netanyahu, meeting Trump on April 7th, pushed for airstrikes if talks fail, citing Iran's weakened proxies after 2023 Hezbollah losses. The U.S. sanctioned 50 Iranian-linked firms on April 1st, costing $2 billion, but China's oil purchases undermine enforcement. For libertarians, Trump's diplomacy risks legitimizing Iran's nuclear ambitions, while Netanyahu's hawkishness fuels war profiteering, with $886 billion Pentagon budgets bloating. As Rome talks advance, Israel braces for action, global markets jitter, and the Russia-China-North Korea axis watches, ready to exploit U.S. divisions or escalation in the Middle East. Chapter 2. Background of Iran's nuclear program and U.S. policy. Iran's nuclear program, launched in the 1950s with U.S. support, turned military after the 1979 Islamic Revolution. By 2003, Iran enriched uranium to 20%, triggering UN sanctions costing $50 billion in trade by 2015. The 2015 nuclear deal, backed by the US, Russia, China, and Europe, capped enrichment at 3.67% for civilian use, lifting sanctions worth $100 billion. Trump's 2018 withdrawal reimposed sanctions, slashing Iran's oil exports from 2.5 million to 800,000 barrels daily by 2020, cutting GDP 6%. Iran resumed enrichment, reaching 60% by 2024, a step from bomb grade. Trump's 2018-2019 North Korea talks failed to curb its 50 warheads, mirroring Iran's defiance. Negotiations from 2021 to 2023 collapsed, unable to guarantee U.S. commitment. Trump's 2025 sanctions targeted Iran's nuclear firms and China's refineries, costing $2 billion yearly. Social media notes Iran's distrust, viewing talks as traps to weaken sovereignty. Since 2018, U.S. sanctions cost Iran $50 billion in oil revenue, pushing it toward Russia and China. For libertarians, sanctions rob nations, not regimes, while $886 billion Pentagon budgets profit war hawks. Netanyahu's fear of a 2015-style deal, set to expire in 2030, drives his push to block negotiations, risking war as Iran's nuclear advances challenge Israel and U.S. influence. Chapter 3. Netanyahu's motives and Israel's strike plans. Netanyahu's alarm is driven by Iran's nuclear threat and domestic pressures. Iran's 60% uranium enrichment, 5,000 centrifuges, and fortified missile cities could yield a bomb in weeks, endangering Israel amid its anti-Israel rhetoric. Netanyahu, weakened by 2023, Hezbollah losses and Syria's collapse, sees Iran vulnerable, ideal for strikes, according to social media. He proposed a May 2025 U.S.-Israel operation targeting Iran's nuclear sites, including airstrikes and commando raids, to delay its program 1 year. But Trump prioritized Rome talks. Netanyahu demands a full nuclear shutdown, unlike the 2015 deal's 3.67% cap, fearing Iran's 2030 breakout. Israel's $20 billion defense budget, 5% of GDP, relies on U.S. aid, requiring approval for strikes. At home, Netanyahu faces protests over Gaza's ongoing conflict. A strike could rally support, per social media buzz. For libertarians, his push fuels war profiteering, with U.S. defense firms like Lockheed Martin gaining from $886 billion Pentagon budgets. Sanctions costing $2 billion fail, as China's oil buys sustain Iran, exposing globalist agendas. Netanyahu's pressure on Rome talks aims to block a deal that could legitimize Iran's program, but Trump's diplomatic focus leaves Israel preparing for unilateral action, risking escalation or isolation if negotiations proceed without a total shutdown, as Iran's Axis allies strengthen. Chapter 4. Trump's divided team and diplomatic push. Trump's Rome talks expose fractures in his administration. On April 12th, his envoy met Iran's foreign minister in Oman, followed by Rome on April 19th, aiming for a deal capping Iran's enrichment at 3.67%. Trump, wary of war's $1 trillion cost, resists hawks like Marco Rubio and Mike Waltz, who back Netanyahu's call for strikes and a complete nuclear shutdown. Advisors favoring a deal see diplomacy as viable, citing Iran's weakened proxies post-2023. Trump's March 3rd ultimatum, deal or bombing, met Iran's demand for sanctions relief, not dismantling, stalling talks. Social media fears a deal echoing 2015's framework, expiring in 2030. The U.S. deployed B-2 bombers to Diego Garcia, costing $1 billion as a contingency. Sanctions on 50 Chinese firms, costing $2 billion falter as China buys 90% of Iran's oil, undermining enforcement. For libertarians, Trump's talks risk legitimizing Iran's nukes, while hawks push $886 billion Pentagon budgets for war profits, bloating globalist agendas. Rome's framework, set for expert talks in Oman by April 26, tests Trump's resolve, compromise, or escalate, leaving allies skeptical. Japan, reliant on Gulf oil, and Europe, hit by 10% U.S. tariffs, question U.S. leadership, while Russia and China's Axis watches, ready to exploit a weak deal or military overreach in the escalating nuclear standoff. Chapter 5. Global and regional fallout. The Axis's defiance and Rome talks shake markets and alliances. Iran's 1.4 million barrels daily, 4% of global oil, stabilize prices, but U.S. sanctions risk disrupting the Strait of Hormuz, where 20% of crude flows. Brent crude hit $90 in April 2025, with Europe's refineries down 3%. Germany's output cut 2%. The S&P 500 fell 5%. U.S. gas rose 8%, costing drivers $200 yearly. India and Angola buy Iran's oil, dodging $1 billion in U.S. enforcement. Social media warns of energy chaos. In Asia, South Korea's $5 billion U.S.-based dispute and Japan's $2 billion naval drills signal fear of Axis missiles, worsened by chip shortages. NATO's $1.2 trillion budget strains as France seeks autonomy and Turkey explores Russia's gas, mirroring regional tensions. Russia and China's $5 billion Iran trade counter sanctions, bolstering the Axis. For libertarians, U.S. sanctions and $886 billion Pentagon budgets hurt consumers, not Iran, fueling war profiteering. If talks fail, strikes could spike oil to $100, tank markets 10%, and ignite a Gulf War, impacting allies like Saudi Arabia. A weak deal risks emboldening Iran's nukes, strengthening its axis with Russia, China, and North Korea, leaving Israel and NATO exposed to a multipolar shift, with markets and alliances buckling under the threat of escalation. Chapter 6. Libertarian Truth and Outlook. Netanyahu's panic over Trump's Iran talks exposes U.S. maximum pressure as a globalist failure. Iran's 60% uranium, backed by China's $5 billion oil buys and Russia's $500 million tech, defies $2 billion sanctions that raise U.S. gas 8% and tank markets 5%. Social media fears a nuclear spiral as Rome's April 19th talks, set for Oman expert meetings by April 26th, stall. Iran refuses to dismantle, demanding sanctions relief. Libertarians know sanctions rob the poor, bases provoke, and $886 billion Pentagon budgets profit elites, not people. Trump's team splits. Diplomats push a deal like 2015's, expiring 2030, while hawks demand strikes costing $1 trillion. NATO's $1.2 trillion budget frays as France and Turkey drift, echoing regional tensions. If Trump strikes post-May 31st, Russia and North Korea's axis may escalate, risking Asia-Gulf war with 28,000 U.S. troops exposed. A deal seems unlikely. Iran holds firm. Trump offers threats. Libertarians demand non-intervention, seeing U.S. policy as chaos, not peace. The Axis's rise signals a multipolar shift, but war looms. $90 Brent crude, 5% market drops warn of worse. Will Trump's talks avert disaster or spark a war enriching globalists? The cost is American, the stakes global. Sanctions and bombs fuel chaos, not solutions, as Iran's nuclear defiance reshapes power. Call to action. Netanyahu's fear of Trump's Iran deal risks war or a weak accord, with sanctions hiking gas 8% and war budget soaring. Social media dreads nuclear chaos as talks teeter. Will Trump's diplomacy stop Iran's nukes or ignite global conflict? Share your take below. Subscribe to Libertarian Uncensored for raw truth on power shifts shaking your world.